Well, hello, everybody. I am excited for us to kick off our webinar series today. Breaking Barriers, Advancing Educational Equity is the topic for today. It's the first in a series of webinars that we're doing to create conversation about the new report that we are releasing, which is called Our Dreams Won't Be Deferred, Reclaiming Progress for Black Men and Boys in an Age of Retreat. So today's conversation is going to focus on the persistent disparities in education that we are seeing and lift up some community-based and policy-driven strategies to close these opportunity gaps for Black students in America. So this new report that we are preparing to release is a follow-up to a report actually that I wrote 15 years ago that's called We Dream a World, the 2025 Vision for Black Men and Boys. And so for me, it's nostalgic in a way to have this conversation today. And it is so important for us to be bringing this conversation about our Black men and boys back to the forefront of what's happening in our nation. So the report that was written in 2010, it was the product of several years of planning, meeting, strategizing by a group of very dedicated leaders nationwide who formed what we called the 2025 Campaign for Black Men and Boys. This campaign was initially funded by the 21st Century Foundation, and it brought together community organizers, concerned citizens, researchers, policy advocates, nonprofit leaders from all across the nation who really wanted to create change for Black men and boys in America. That campaign launched in 2007, and the report was released in 2010. And the premise of that first report was that boys born when the campaign started would be 18 years old in the year 2025. And that we have an opportunity to make impact in the areas of education, criminal justice, health, fatherhood, employment, in ways that would help those boys and their families to thrive. And that we knew that in 2025, when they turned 18, their life prospects could look different if we had the will to really make it happen. That seminal report, We Dream a World, it was instrumental in really moving the field forward in a lot of ways. The field of philanthropy, as a result of that report, committed and made targeted investments in the field of boys and young men of color broadly. And it led to the creation of major initiatives like Forward Promise, which was within the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Executive Alliance for Boys and Young Men of Color, President Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative. And so here we sit 15 years later, right? It is actually 2025. Those little boys are now 18 years old. And this really resonates deeply with me because I'm the mom of a 20-year-old young man. And so I have lived this history as we've watched it unfold. So we've lived through a lot in the last 15 years. We've lived through our first Black president, an international pandemic, racial violence and upheaval in our communities. And now we're facing this toxic political environment that is threatening our very democracy. So this new report that we will be releasing in the next couple of months fully, again, it's called Our Dreams Won't Be Deferred, Reclaiming Progress for Black Men and Boys in an Age of Retreat. It builds upon the original and it highlights the significance of what we've seen in the last 15 years. And it's framed around the time that we're presently sitting in. So the naming of the report is deliberate because we really want to invoke this idea of action and forward movement. We're living in this space right now where a lot of people seem to be retreating in terms of resource, in terms of political action, and in terms of the courage to speak directly about the issue of Black men and boys. But we know that our communities of color are the ones that are most deeply impacted by everything that we're seeing happening now. And so now is not a time for retreat. It's a time to really stand firm, to talk about these issues, to push forward, even when it appears that others are shrinking or retreating. And we know that we've made some really good gains in the last 15 years in terms of the area of education, but we still have some areas of concern that we need to be uplifting and doing something about. So we know that our graduation completion rates are higher. We know that our boys are accessing early childhood programming and after school programming at higher rates, and that college degree attainment has grown. However, we're still seeing some equity gaps that are really a challenge. So, although more kids are accessing early childhood education, they have lesser access to what we deem to be high quality programs. And so it means that they still are not really on a level playing field to be successful when they get into kindergarten. We're still seeing some literacy and numeracy gaps. Our Black boys are remaining a target for suspension and expulsion. And we're seeing declining college enrollment. So, although we've made some strides, there are still some very big and important issues for us to be talking about. And so, we've invited four brothers today who are educational experts into a conversation to talk about all of these things. We have with us Dr. Charles Foust, who's an executive coach and a seasoned leader in transformational education. He's previously served as a school superintendent in several communities, and he has a successful track record of double-digit growth in his schools. We also have with us Larry Simmons Jr., who is a West Baltimore native. I gotta get it right. He's a West Baltimore native, and he's committed to improving the health, wellness, and economic vibrancy of Baltimore City's neighborhoods. Larry wears a lot of hats in Baltimore. He is the man. He's involved in the Baltimore City School Board as a commissioner. He's the chair of the board of directors for Baltimore Children and Youth Fund, and he also directs the Nobody Asked Me campaign. We have Dr. Kevin Beckford, who is an advocate for educational equity, digital inclusion, and justice impacted youth. He's the co-founder of the Hustlers Guild, which is an educational nonprofit that creates access to career pathways for students from our under-resourced communities. And we have Brandon Kitchin. Brandon is the Assistant Director of Social Change and Intercultural Engagement at Southern Methodist University in their Division of Student Affairs. He is also an award-winning writer and freelance journalist. So each of you comes to this with a depth of experience and knowledge in the education sector. So I'm really excited for us to dive into a conversation together about what breaking down barriers and moving towards educational equity really looks like for our Black boys and our young men. But I want to start us off today with a more personal question. I've given you all and the audience a brief history of where we've been in the last 20 years or so in the Black men and boys movement and work. And so I want to ask each of you, where were you in your life or educational journey 15 years ago when that first paper was written? I'm going to start with Larry.
Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. But I was in transition between running youth after school programs with schools and actually moving into the role of a community school coordinator. So just understanding that strategy was really schools gained a community organizer that really addressed the needs and barriers that young people faced and needed support in it, particularly and also with their families. And I kind of think through the 15 years since the report, we've seen progress in higher education rates and lower youth incarceration, but we're still in this place of underinvestment, over-policing, and systemic exclusion, particularly with our young people, boys and girls, really. And I think that over the 15 years, I've really been working towards this space of really helping to create an opportunity and space where every child is included, not depending on their zip codes or what part of the city they live in, but making sure that there's equal opportunity across the work. So I'm excited to be here and looking forward to more conversation.
Thank you. Charles.
So 15 years ago, I was a principal at that time. I was in Houston, and I had never seen the world in with so much color. I was a native of Greensboro, North Carolina, and so it's typically just black and white. But when I got to Houston, it was just a sea of color. And that was my first experience with doing low performing turnaround work. And we
Mm,
did it that time in 1 year we did like 20 points, 20 percentage points of growth. And it was like, well, how did you do it? What did you do? What did you do? And we had we even had the teachers union to celebrate us. um, and so they're like, what did you do? I said, well, I hired teachers and I had them do what they were hired to do, teach. And all the other stuff, if it was like social worker work, the social worker did it. If it was the nursing work, nurse did it. If it was assistant principal did it. I needed them to teach kids. And of course there was more to it, but I remember that vividly, just being able to see in the world of urban education. I did a lot of suburban earlier in my years, from graduating from A&T and staying in Greensboro for about 12, 13 years, and then, well, actually, it was about 10 years, and then going to Houston in 2010 and being there for 7 years. It was just beautiful to see it. And then being able to, honestly, I always wanted someone when I was a teacher to show me how to do it. And so when I was a principal, that's what I did. I showed them how to do it. And so then when I became a principal supervisor, I showed them what to do, or look for those that different lens of saying, hey, you look for this, you do this, and you stay on to that. Stop moving around. It confuses people when you don't hold people accountable, and you're holding them accountable, and then you're doing multiple things. Name that one thing and do it. And so that is what was going on in the 15 years ago. And I've honestly just continued with that. And I don't make educational practices hard. I call myself the translator.
mhm.
And I just translate what people need to hear. They hear it, and I'm like, no, that's not actually what we're supposed to be doing. So that's how I'll say I make my living, um, but it's also empowering teachers and principals and parents and students. And I tell people, you coach without the emotion, you teach without the emotion, you lead without the emotion. These people don't go home with you, they're at work with you. So kill the emotion and do what you were hired to do. And so that's my passion, that's my love, and I'm gonna get off my soapbox and because I'll get fired up real quick.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm already hearing parallels, you and Larry already talking about this notion of community and community schools where you bring in all of the resources that are needed for young people and don't just overburden the teachers with taking on all of those tasks. But you have to really identify the breadth of what is needed, particularly for the community that you're serving. But I'm going to jump back and allow Brandon and then Kevin to talk about where they were 15 years ago. Then we're going to get back into the meat of some of that conversation.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm so glad to be here and be amongst this amazing panel. So when I was reading this report and having this question of where I was 15 years ago, I realized I was probably the most in the line of this report. I was 12
Mm,
years old, going into eighth grade 15 years ago in 2010. And for context, I'm the youngest of three siblings. And my brother is 2.5 years older than me. My sister is 15 years older than me. She was already, well out of college, doing living her life. My brother, so I'm like his tether. He was always the brainiac. Could in his sleep get A's, and I had to really try my hardest to get an A minus, let alone a B plus. I was the fine arts gifted, individual. I was in band. I was also in basketball, and I realized I was in this interesting space where I started seeing a conflict. My band director didn't want me to be in basketball. My coach didn't want me to be in band, but I was good at both. And so academically, my teachers would compare me to my brother. They go, "Oh, yeah, Brandon's not Marcus, and he's just super in class, and he super, what's the word, distracted. He's always drumming on his desk, or he's talking about NBA players, and his grades were never the same as Marcus." And my mom would always go, "Well, don't compare Brandon to Marcus. That's not who he is." And so I would get random discipline charges, and I wasn't getting referrals or getting put this suspension, but I would definitely get sent out in the hallway, or or told, I was doing too much. And so it really just turned off my mind to the academics. And really, what my saving grace that prepared me to be successful was that my mom worked in the school district. She never worked at the school that I was currently at, which was actually a great thing, but I was just definitely on speed dial, just did the extension. And Miss Kitchen, here's what Brandon did today. But at least her name carried a lot of weight in my district, and so the teachers looked after me. As I was reflecting, I had there was three black men teachers who were in my junior high. Two of them were coaches. Never had them in homeroom or actually as a teacher, but I did have the coaches. I got to high school. I had two black male assistant principals, and majority of the black male were in coaching staff. But once I decided after my freshman year to quit basketball to pursue band full time, I lost that connection to some degree. What kept me connected to them was again my mom in the district as a senior level administrator to look after me, and also my brother being 2 years apart. He was in football, I was in band, so I saw the coaches weekly. So they made sure that after he graduated, I was still kind of under their wing. That led me to college. I went to TCU, Texas Christian University, in Fort Worth. And I really, once I got to college, I think I recognized how talented and how brilliant I was. But I was really jaded in junior high and high school because all the narratives that were placed upon black men. You're only good for certain things, athlete primarily, or entertaining other people, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do in life until I figured it out. So I know I talk about my experience in higher ed now as a professional, but that was my experience 15 years ago. I wasn't sure how I was, but thankfully I had people who were part of my village to make sure I didn't get lost in the way.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think you raised a lot of things that our boys are currently experiencing that they don't know how to give voice to yet. So I want to make sure we bring that into the conversation today. So, Kevin, what about you? Where were you?
Yeah, so peace and blessings to you all, to the Moriah Group. First and foremost, thank you for this invitation. Happy to be here. 15 years ago, I was navigating the tension of being a first generation high school graduate, a first generation college graduate to be. I had a lot of responsibilities, caretaking for family members, and I was a junior at Yale University, which was a very different environment from the one in which I grew up. I'm originally from Camden, New Jersey. I grew up in Camden, Atlantic City, Philadelphia, that South Jersey area. So I was navigating the challenges and tensions that come with being at a predominantly white institution, an Ivy League institution at that. Some particular unfortunate things were happening, such as racial profiling, and just trying to acclimate to a completely different environment, and also maintain, high standards of academic excellence. What was my saving grace was the community. It was my involvement in organizations like the Yale Black Men's Union that provided us as college students, Black men, the opportunity to go into schools and to mentor and to tutor. It was there that I realized I had a passion for education and I had a passion for teaching. I did not have, despite coming from predominantly Black and Latino schools, I really didn't have Black teachers ever in my life. I had two Black male teachers, and it was the experience of being in those classrooms in New Haven and seeing the beauty and the talent and the strength that was there in spite of some systemic and resource driven conditions. It made me realize that, wow, I have the potential as an educator to do something great. And I'm young and idealistic, and my thought was, let me go into the classroom for a period of time and actualize whatever change I can, and then go into policy. And that would ultimately be my trajectory, right? I spent a number of years in the classroom teaching in Philadelphia before working in government and the policy space, um, and then eventually starting my own nonprofit. And all of that, I've learned, just the importance of mentorship, the importance of networks, and the importance of community. That's what helped me sustain my own sanity 15 years ago, navigating the institution I went to, which I love. But then also, being an advocate for students now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we don't talk as much about that mental health aspect as it relates to navigating those new spaces, and the supports that we need to give our young men as we're launching them up. We're happy that they're successful, but there's still some supports that need to be wrapped around them. So thank you for raising that as a part of your story. You know, we often start this conversation about education with the boys, right? And focus on their gaps and their areas. But I want to turn that on its head. And I want us to start by talking about the systems, because to me, the root of the problem is that our systems are not humanizing and they're not culturally responsive. And so the solutions don't rest in what we can do for one or two boys here and there. The solutions rest in how do we transform our educational systems to be spaces that are safe for our boys and are giving them the ultimate opportunities for success. So I'll start with you, Charles, but I want all of you all to chime in. When you think about the academic environment and the systems, what do you think our school leaders need to be doing differently and can be doing differently right now?
So the first thing you have to do is just understand not everyone has the same background as yourself. So oftentimes, I think school leaders want to mold kids into them. This is the path you need to go down. This is safe. This is what you're going to do. We're here to educate you. But first, you've got to understand the child and you've got to build a relationship with them in order to get them to understand why they need to be educated, why they need to read on grade level, why they need to do math. So we often miss the bus with so many of our kids, so many of our Black males, because we want to force it. And oftentimes it's the testosterone butting heads against one another. I'm going to tell you, dude, if you don't do it right, I'm putting you out. And that's our only go-to. It's almost like, um, uh, if you're a basketball player and if you're always going to the right, that's all you've got. It's like if you're going to suspend them, that's all. Then what?
Mm.
So you can't just keep. You've got to have something other than suspension on the plate. Oftentimes they have to defend themselves in communities. You've got to make it a safe space for them so that they know that, listen, guy, I'm a grown man. We're not about to go back and forth. And so you are, whatever age, I'm this age, we can make this work. And so that's where I believe we miss it. And that is one thing that I've often shared with, and I'll be honest with you, I live by I practice what I preach. So even as a teacher, I would tell them, I'm not arguing with you. If you want to argue, you've got the wrong classroom. This is my classroom. We say it, we're going to do it, and that's it. Like, we're not going back and forth. I don't go back and forth with my own children, so I'm not going back and forth with you. I'm not going to disrespect you. You're not going to disrespect me. And so those were the things. And so even when going forth, like with a male child, um, oftentimes we approach them face to face. Sometimes I would, well, not sometimes I would always approach them from the side and say, things like, so that's how we're doing things today. And it would be from the side of them. And so they would be looking forward. So it wasn't an aggressive approach because I know who I am. They know who they are. We're not here to, we're not here to settle out in the again, it's a child. That is a child. We forget that is a child. That is someone's child. And I've often said we always want people to come and advocate for their kids, but we want to define how they advocate for them. Not everyone comes in a suit and tie and speaks the King's English. When they get upset, they don't just use these eloquent language. Sometimes you have to meet them where they are, but not in that controversial way. Like,
Mhm.
allow them to understand that this is the place to express yourself, but then give them guidelines of how we express and show them this is how we express ourselves. So I think that is where we miss the bus. And once we go off the road once we're derailed with some of our male children, we can't get them back because it's been repeated and repeated. And so that's their expectation of how everyone is going to treat them.
Right. You've dehumanized them and now you can't win them back to do the good.
Correct.
Larry, I see you want to jump in.
Yeah, so I would I would have a little bit of a different opinion with that. I think that to kind of roll us back a little bit, we as a country, as people, we do to the victim instead of the issue, right? And so we do so much to young people within a system that we're not addressing. And so I don't think of so when I the question didn't spark discipline to me, it sparked all of the things that we do to young people, whether it's around discipline, whether it's school, whether it's transportation, we do to them versus taking a step back and looking at the systems that we're trying to get people to be a part of that are not and have not ever worked, right? And so the work is not always on the young person or their family. The work is on this system that we're all trying to exist in. Once that happens, then we can do the work together with young people. But coming up with solutions without them at the table, never going to work. I don't believe that once you lose them, you lose them. I think that there is some restorative work that we as adults who are employed and who have accepted the charge of being a part of raising young people have to sometimes check ourselves, which Dr. Faust kind of mentioned. But I don't ever believe that once they're gone, we lost them. I think that that's when we have to really step back and really begin to build on the relationship that we probably didn't have at the beginning. I think sometimes that's also what we miss, those opportunities to build relationships very early on, not just with the young person, but also the family and the community that the young person comes from, right? Because oftentimes, black, brown, green, or purple, whoever you are as the educator, you're probably a visitor to that neighborhood every single day, right? You taken the time to invest, to step outside of your classroom, to get connected to some of those community organizations that are partnering with your school to support the work, right? They're not just usually extra bodies in the building, but they're there to support what's happening. But have you taken that time? Now, I do understand there was a time when we all went to school and we got the degrees or work, got degrees in education and said, hey, I want to be a teacher. And then you get to school and you're like, damn, it's all these other things I have to do, right? So I hear that a lot from like younger teachers, right? Those folks who come out of TFA who, I just wanted to teach. And then you got me doing all this social worker stuff. Isn't it a lady upstairs that does this stuff, right? But you are the first on the list of people that are supposed to be supporting that young person, right? And maybe you didn't get that at the school that you attended, but I know at my school at HBCU, we definitely understood that you're going to get some other stuff that you got to deal with along with trying to get the ABCs across to your young people. But again, just to go back, it really is that relationship, right? Those opportunities to build relationship with young people, to work with them, to kind of work on this system that keeps us all on this hamster wheel of needs and services, needs and services, needs and services, right? When do we help those young people and those families get off of the hamster wheel? We can't always villainize the victim, because that's what we really do. And we do it really well, right? And so the hard part is stepping back, looking at self and saying, how do I support this family? How do I support this boy? How do I support this mom or granny that's trying to raise this boy?
So, Larry, I'm going to ask you one follow-up question, then we're going to go to Kevin. Is there a particular systems reform that you're working on right now or have implemented in Baltimore that is working well?
Yes. So I would say that, often, again, going back to that whole system change, right? And so around the time of the beginning of the report, um, Baltimore, along with a couple of other cities, received some funding after, stress and violence. It came from SAMHSA, recast dollars, and we were able to create a small community-led board who had this charge of putting $5 million out to their community in ways they didn't know, right? My first couple of meetings was, we're going to get some t-shirts and we're going to buy some hats. And it's like, yo, you still have 99, you have gazillions of dollars left to spend. I get that. But what we were able to do in partnership with the Baltimore City Health Department, and then again with our comptroller as well, was one, we created a community-based granting opportunity, right? So organizations who were working in their neighborhoods, maybe in partnership with schools, maybe not, after school program, but their budgets were less than $100,000. They were $20,000 grants. These are the mom and pop folks who on your block are picking up kids after school every day, right? So what we were able to do was help them put an application process together that was community driven, right? So people were able to do videos or have someone speak for them, or they did an application if it hit their heart. But these organizations were in spaces where like big orgs like the Y and Boys and Girls Club would always kind of dominate that funding space. This was for those small organizations. And from that work, the work of the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund kind of sprung out of it, right? So now we use 5% of city tax dollars to fund organizations with running budgets less than $500,000, still serving Black and brown children led by Black and brown people. But then also there's TA and all types of programmatic support that oftentimes we don't come with, right? Sometimes I can't just drop the $1 million on you and say run the program if you've never had $1 million to run program, right? So I got to support you for a certain amount of time to make sure that you do right and that the reporting happens and that you're still able to run program. And that's what we've been able to do for the last 6 years, all sprung out of a small community group, B City, right? Really pushing on the comptroller who at that time was trying to say, okay, Mr. Simmons and crew, you all want to give out these dollars, but this is what the city contract looks like. And we say, hey, we only giving out $20,000 grants. Mm-hmm. These folks don't have $1 million of insurance. And so being able to have that good tension with City Hall created this opportunity, again, saying that if you're going to, you got to walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk, right? Mm-hmm. And if you are going to provide folks these $100,000 grants, you got to create a system that supports that. They cannot have the same contract that Catholic Charities or United Way would have, right? Yeah, they have the $1 million of insurance, but Miss Shirley's after school program, no, she does not. And we can't hold her accountable to that. So we were able to do that. So that's basically what I'm saying again. You can't villainize the victim. You got to push on those systems that have created this space that we're all in.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Kevin, I'm gonna let you jump in here.
Yeah, Rhonda, I truly appreciate the framing of that question and the focus on systems. As Larry shared, it is the case that it's not enough that our systems, our agencies, our schools are doing internal audits, looking inward and seeing like where practice and policy could be better into the benefit of students. So often there is a deficit-oriented approach and looking at student outcomes and student data. And it's imperative that systems do continuous review alongside review of student outcomes as it pertains to data. And, I'm a big proponent of school districts evaluating data through a race gender lens to the extent that it is possible, right? Like getting granular and seeing where outcomes are excelling and when they are lagging, right? And running that alongside system performance, alongside teacher performance, and doing some intersectional analysis to see where the system is honoring students and where they are failing students. I'll just provide two really brief examples of, why I think such audits are important and what it could look like. I worked with a client a couple years back, a school district, to basically do an audit. And it was predominantly Latino district. And they were wondering, like, what are the communications challenges we're having? Like, why aren't parents, for example, like engaged, right? Lo and behold, the website was in English. You got a predominantly Latino community and you don't even have another option to access the information. All your materials as such aren't relevant, right? And so it was like, okay, like that audit, that I was able to be a part of was necessary in that illumination, which is unfortunate. And then a second, there was another client, I worked with a network of schools that really did some phenomenal work looking at graduation rates using a race gender lens. And so they had created a database where they were able to see, graduation credits, gaps, amongst student populations, and then run that alongside, the counseling services and the involvement of those stakeholders within the school to really tailor their responses to those gaps. And so I'm a big proponent of audits and looking and evaluating through a race gender lens.
Yeah. No, I definitely appreciate that. One of the things that I've also pushed on a lot is doing it at the school level, not at the district level, because a lot of school districts can mask what's really going on with their kids of color because they just do this big analysis at the district level and shoot the information out and say, "Oh, we're thriving, we're doing well." But you have to do it at the school by school level on an annual basis and then use it to hold educators in those buildings accountable.
That's so important. If I can quickly say why that is so key. So within this network, there was I just mentioned, there was a stellar high performing school, right? It was like the star, and like the network was using its data to kind of, perpetuate that, like, at large we're doing great. But when there was a granular look into the school and what was happening, it was found out that the Black boys and the Latino boys and the Black girls were being done the greatest disservice, right? They had the largest gaps in graduation compared to some of the other schools that may not have been as high performing, but at least were meeting the needs of students who have been historically marginalized.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Brandon, you've been dropping a lot in the chat and giving us a lot of good information. So I want to invite you into the conversation. You look at this from the post-secondary level because of the space that you sit in. A lot of what we've talked about has been at the K-12 level. How do you see this manifesting when you're working with students in college?
Absolutely, yeah. That's definitely my context, the higher educational experience. So I currently work at SMU, Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. It is a Division I sports level. We just recently joined the ACC last year, so we're now a Power Four conference school. We are right in the middle of Highland Park, University Park, which is one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the entire country. By 2027, we will be $100,000 a year institution. That is cost of attendance. What else can I tell you? We are a predominantly white institution, and I work in the multicultural office slash community engagement office. So very student facing, and how I see the policies and the systems play out at my institution, let alone other institutions. I have been at my undergrad was at a PWI across the Metroplex. When you get to this level of affluence and just the politicalness of college campuses, and you get people from all across the world into one space, it's really tense. People are going to self-segregate naturally, right? You're not getting in SMU if you're not brilliant. That's not the impossible. It's not going to happen if you just drag your feet in courses in high school. So we come talking about people who are brilliant and have high test scores, extremely involved in extracurriculars, leadership, all that kind of stuff. These are well-rounded students. The problem that exists is how do they navigate? So you got people who come from all white communities, people who come from all black, all brown communities, multiracial, multicultural communities, of levels of students. Freshmen are driving G-Wagons and Porsches. People don't have cars, right? It's a utopia for some, and for some, it's like, what did I just land myself in? Did this is even a real place, right? So I'm here as someone to try to build bridges across division. In my own lived experience, being from Southeast Arlington in a school district, and also my school, my elementary, my junior high, and my high school were actually the most racially diverse schools within the district. We didn't have the highest percentage per se. We were actually the second usually between the district, but when you add in white, Hispanic, Asian, Black, we were always the top school. My best friends, my friends in sports and friends in fine arts looked not like me usually. So I was easily comfortable navigating that space. So when I see students now, and even professionals who didn't grow up with the multicultural lens like I did, they don't even know how to communicate with one another. So I'm like a unicorn because I lived it, but I also can practice it in my profession. So when I go to events that are non-black events, we're talking about intersectionality, our women in the LGBT center is literally like our sister office away, and I pull up and I'm there. Usually not the students don't look at me weird, but the staff go, "Why is Brandon at that event? Why would administrator not want to go to a student event?" Right. But they place me in this box as a straight cisgender black man and go, well, if Brandon's going to the LGBT center, like, what is that? Or Brandon's hanging out with the Asian students as they have an event tonight to celebrate Lunar New Year, right? Or when I see students who are Hispanic or black from Dallas, right? If you've ever been to Dallas, Dallas is an extremely black and brown city. Yet Highland Park and SMU don't reflect that. The
Mm,
only way you see that reflected is really in our athletic department and our football team, but that's not actually the case. So it also creates another kind of false reality.
mm,
And that's I think that's a big part too. One of my biggest things I'm trying to help address at SMU, let alone wherever I go in the future of my career, is removing that invisible line of athletes and non-athletes. Right. I told y'all earlier I quit basketball to do band full time, went to undergrad, was extremely involved in extracurriculars, but because I was at another Division One, Big 12, PWI, everyone thought I was an athlete. I'm 6 foot tall. I got locks. I'm pretty in decent shape. People just assumed that I was an athlete, and I'm like, no. I mean, I was in marching band, so I'm athletic. I'm carrying 50-pound drum. Don't get me wrong. I'm on the field at halftime, but they just assume that I'm not an intellectual individual, right? I was top of my class in journalism. I mentioned I was, you mentioned it for me, Dr. Rhonda, that, I was award winning, been a part of projects that have won Emmys and I've won national awards and I still freelance. I was homecoming king as a black man, one of, I think, five in history of the institution. I'm on two boards right now for my alma mater. I'm the president of Black Faculty Staff Association on campus, right? So I'm holding these different roles, but people only reduce me to, well, are you a football player? That's the first question they ask me. And they ask that to these students. So it is really draining when you come here and you're a full ride scholar, chasing mechanical engineering or a dance degree, and people just frame you in a box. And that's kind of why I mentioned earlier, I was so jaded in middle school because people just put these stereotypes on me. And you get to a point to where you either resent, I guess, your own identity, or you just kind of just start moving cold. And that was me. I didn't hate myself, but I just like, well, I could care less what y'all think. So I'm really trying to be that positive representation and in the system. And so I'll end with this and share more later. Me as president of our affinity group, our Black Faculty and Staff Association, my biggest charge, I have one more year left in my role, is to increase our visibility at student events. Student affairs is much different. I'm not a faculty member. I'm not a professor. So I'm not really in that in academic space, but I do have a chance to meaningfully build student leaders. Particularly the black men look after me. I advise a student organization called Black Men Emerging. And I was also part of the re-establishing of the chapter of the Omegas on campus. I am an Omega myself, and they had a 10-year hiatus. We brought them back in the spring. So I work really, really hard to make sure that they see me, but I see them. I greet them every day. How you doing, brother? Go out and shake everybody's hand. I host events called the Barber Shop. It's like if you've seen the shop that LeBron does. I hire barbers. We have ours on day after Labor Day, so next two Tuesdays from now, pay them in advance so they get free haircuts to the brothers. And we just come together and talk about issues that pertain to the black community, and we're going to address mental health. So one of my best friends from grade school, who actually is a substance abuse counselor in our health department, and the assistant director of our health center is a black man too. And so both of them are going to come and lead a session on black mental health. And I'm just the one who's behind the scenes facilitating the space, and it's going to be a beautiful experience. So um, I'm one of seven black men in student affairs. There's 113 full-time staff. I'm one of seven black men, but I'm the only black man who works in the student center. So
mm,
I don't get a chance to not be, well, I could say a lot of things. my presence and whatever I do, whatever I don't do gets picked up easily because people can hide in their building, but everyone's coming to the student center. So I'm the top prospect.
So what I hear in that is, and I think this applies not just in college, but throughout K-12, right, is that our boys are put in a box and dehumanized, and their identity is framed in ways by other people. And if they deviate from that, the positive aspects of that identity, right, then they're vilified. But then there are also negative pieces of identity that are automatically tagged onto our boys that they have to fight against every single day, right? And so we want them to navigate educational spaces, but they are also navigating perception and identity, other people's control over their narrative. And all of that is having an effect on their ability to be successful because there's a layer of work that they have to do mentally before they can even begin to be academically successful. And so I really want us to think about, what do the young people actually have to say about the educational system? What do they have to say about the data that is spoken about them and the opportunities for reform that should be present? And Larry, I know you stay in this space, and so I wanted you to chime in. I know Kevin works with young people. So share with me, what do you think young people are experiencing, and what are they saying about what the solution should be?
I mean, and thank you, Brandon. I think that we have to address, like, there's so many things that young people deal with before walking into a school building, right? But we sometimes as educators expect them, which Dr. Foust kind of mentioned, that they should, that we expect them to be like us, ready to walk into the building, ready to work, right? And in a district like Baltimore, we don't have yellow bus service for our students. We've never had yellow bus service for our students. We're the only district in the state of Maryland that does not provide yellow bus service to our young people unless they're homeless, and that's through McKinney Veto, right? So you think, and then we have school choice, and so you are sometimes your trip to school might be 90 minutes, right, on the public transportation, and you've been sexually harassed. Somebody, when you woke up, told you get your ass up, right? So you got cussed out getting up out the bed. You had to walk to the bus stop. All types of things are happening. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. You get on the public transportation, somebody's groping you, and then you walk into a building and someone says, "Why are you late? What's your problem? Get this work done." Right? Not understanding the fact that, one, we completely dehumanize young people, right? So once we can accept young people to be humans, right, and all of this stuff that we have planned for them, like the humanization of young people is missing, right? And then thinking about how young people, particularly, let's be a little particular, like young people 14 to 25 years old, right? How do we work in partnership with them in their success, right? Right? How do we listen to young people and really create the pathways that they are telling you they need? I swear to you, we had an opportunity to rethink education after COVID, and we came back and did the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
The same exact thing. Baltimore City had 2,800 young people that they could not find when schools opened back up. They deployed community school coordinators and social workers to go find these young people. You know where they were? At work. Mm-hmm. Right? Running their own businesses that they created during COVID, working at the restaurants, the stores where they had to pick up extra hours and were able to pick up extra hours, right? Because they are the heads of some of their households, right? So we can talk all the classroom stuff that we can do, and we will. But until we begin to address the things that young people deal with outside of school, leading up to school, at home, we just spinning our wheels again on that hamster wheel of need and services, same data, young people ain't shit, that whole deal, right? But until, again, we begin to step into the spaces where we all have power to address those policies, to address those systems that are keeping young people down in partnership with young people.
That's right. That's right. And Kevin, you all do some of that. You all really foster youth voice in terms of transformational
That's
change.
right.
So talk about some of that.
Yes, absolutely. I gotta just first give a quick shout out to Larry. He wears many hats. Preacher is clearly one of them. If not currently in another life, because brother man, you were just preaching. And Rhonda, the question you pose is such an important question, and it's one that's often, I think, posed unfortunately with a little bit of aloofness or not enough
Mm,
seriousness. It's like, how do we involve students and student voice and perspective without really giving them the platform to
mm,
actually voice their concerns and follow up with those concerns with actual changes, whether they be directly in the classroom or in the school or from policy. It's this kind of like, oh, it's cute. We'll invite, the smart student to the school board meeting to give a couple comments and talk about a project, but never is it the case that we're talking to a multitude of students, notably those that have problems with the school and the system, right? To actually come to the table and say, this is the problem I have, and this is what I foresee as a solution that has to be named. In our work working with students, among the things we hear working with students is that one, relevancy, the relevancy of an approach and curriculum. Um, the scope is oftentimes not aligned with their interest and with their community. Um, there's a lot of data and research that says this, and many of us know this from our own personal experiences, but schools are pretty white spaces, right? They're not culturally affirming spaces. They're not places where we can bring ourselves and our histories to, but it's where we're trying to fit into somebody else's history and else perspective. And that's one of the things, that's continuously shared by students. And that's why they need to be engaged. Another thing I would say is it's antiquated. They'll tell you like the approach to learning and to instruction is antiquated. So many of them are like, there is a schism between what they are teaching us and what I know the world wants me to do and be in order to be successful, right? And so it's just imperative for us to create the platforms and the opportunities for there to be an actual transfer of power to young people to actualize the things they deem as problems.
yeah. Charles, jump in.
So one of the things just to say about talk about the listening and getting a grassroots of students, I've always found it imperative for as a leader to invite those students in. And so how would we do that? It's like when even if you're a principal, I don't know if they're principals or whomever on the call, but when I was superintendent, I would do this. I would have all the high schools send me 5 students, and so it would make up the superintendent's student council.
Mhm.
However, those students could not be in the top 10 of any class. It needed to be the other side because what I found is that's where you get your honest truth. If it's not working, they're going to tell you. If they're saying this is whack, man, I hate this, so then you're able to dig in. And what I found to be most interesting is in one of those times we took 25 of them because it was 5 high schools and we did the 5 students from there. We took 25 of them on a college tour. And what they were saying is, hey, Faust, this is good, but it's not fair. It's like, what do you mean it's not fair? It's like, well, we are missing so many other students that need to be on this. And I was like, you're absolutely right. But we have to start here. And so that created this um, thing of how do we get more students to be active on college campuses? How do we get them to tour those colleges? How do we bring it to the parents? Um, we often in another school district we would have to tell parents, listen, um, it is your child, it's in top of their class. Yes, we understand you're living in a shelter. Some of the kids, when I was in Houston, they got into Yale, they got into Harvard, and parents are like, they can't go. They've got to go to the community college. And we're trying to help them understand the values. Like, if they go to this college, they will be able to, they'll be able to take the world on. But they're like, no, they've got to go to HCC, which was Houston Community College, because they've got to help with the family. So we go back and we forget. Again, I go back to what I was saying about we forget that not everyone lives a lifestyle as that educator, where they know where or what it's going to look like tomorrow or making those judgments. It's in survival. And so when students come in, they're most of the time, as you were saying, Mrs. Simmons, they're getting off those trains in survival mode. And when we present in front of them, we aren't in survival mode. We're in middle class mode. And so helping people understand, if we really want to talk about differentiated learning, how are we really going to differentiate how we present to kids versus, oh, yes, there's this thing that's called differentiated learning, and we just put kids in different classes and call that differentiated, but we don't differentiate how we speak to kids, how we lead kids. That's, I think, if we really and truly do that, and when you look at school systems and school districts and communities where they actually buy into the full-on differentiated model, you get a total different trajectory for students.
Yeah.
That's
Brandon, go ahead. I see
That's
you.
a great segue, Dr. Faustus. That's really what I see here, right? And it's important to name higher ed. There's so many different levels of institutions. You have your community colleges, you have your 4-year institutions, but then amongst 4 years, you got your flagships like a UT Texas, Austin. You have your Texas A&M. These are huge. I mean, plus schools, right? Yeah, you got trade schools, but then you got HBCUs. You got your Ivy Leagues, you got your regional institutions, right? So there's so many in public and private, right? So I think for like a Yale, Harvard kind of experience, that also in that prestige of an Ivy also warrants the cost, right? So to your point, a student may get accepted. They may be an exceptional student, top valedictorian, salutatorian of their school, but they may not actually have the understanding of the hidden curriculum in the navigation skills to go be successful at Yale or at Harvard. Simply because when they get there, they're going to be one of 5,000 or something like that. I'm making a number up, and I see it here on campus. Right? I looked at the statistics. SMU was a 7.4% black, which has increased since I've been here for 5 years. It was like 4.5, 5 when I got here. And you split that up, but the athletes on athletes, I'd probably say you get down to about 5%. Takes about 1% off, and then that's men and women, right? So if we're talking about black men, you may only see 70 black men come in a year at SMU, right? And then based on the geography and lived experience, middle class, upper class, lower class, that kind of stuff like that, and then also the proximity to the culture, they may not even be interested in really kicking it with the brothers or going to find out, seek a professor, right? So I think that's where we end up losing students who could be retained. And then as far as Dr. Fast, you mentioned the middle student, the student who's not always in the top 10. That is so amazing because we talk about a staff not perpetuating the cycle, right? We're going to naturally generate those top student leaders because they understand why why we matter. Student affairs or any other mentor matters. They've already been given that. Both my parents and grandparents have degrees, master's degrees. That's a privilege of mine. But for that student who's first generation, who doesn't understand how to navigate a college campus, they're going to really struggle to understand why I should go to my professor for office hours, why I should go seek out a black man who's been here for 1 year, let alone 30 years, and seek his mentorship, right? So I truly encourage students, to come see me, develop their relationship. But I'm also not just putting the charge on them. I will go walk around this campus and I go to events and I introduce myself. Hey, how you doing today? My name is Brandon. What year are you in school? What's your name? What are you majoring in? Because I recognize that across the different colleges of SMU, right? You have your business school, you have your fine arts school, you have your humanities, you have your engineering. It gets even more segregated, right? I think a majority of our black students, let alone black men, are actually in computer science and engineering as far as majors. I have a mentorship program. We have 100 mentors, and among my 100 mentors, I have 30 who are black, and I probably say I have 17 that are men. But the most of those mentors, who are the high performing students that we're talking about, are in engineering. But I just know from working with engineering department that that's where that exists. But you get to the business school, our breadwinning program at SMU is our business Cox school. You may only see 1 to 2 black people in a class of 100. So we talk about that before you even get out of bed to go to class. You're already navigating psychologically a lot of trauma, a lot of isolation. So yeah, academically, the students can be bright. They can be bright leadership wise and potential to succeed and serve. But that what ends up beating them is actually the weathering of the
Mhm.
campus experience because of their blackness
Right.
and being a black male, and you don't see a lot of people represented. So it's hard to be what you can't see.
Larry, you dropped trade schools into the chat. I know you got something to say.
Yeah, and just real quick, because I know that we're almost at time, and I wish that we had more time, and I hope that we'll be able to get back together to have more conversation. But I just also want folks to just be aware that, in many urban districts, there is this pipeline that starts really early, that many families and young people don't really know about, right? It's just kind of in the space, and so it really starts, with school choice, right? And as early as third grade, young people, the system has already made decisions for many of our young men as early as third grade, even earlier when it comes to pre-K and early childhood, like preschool and daycare opportunities. And so, like, when families aren't making, what they sometimes are making the convenient choice, right? The school that their child doesn't have to do a lot of traveling, and that thinking about elementary school, it may not be the right choice that leads them to that top high school, that leads them to that top college, right? And so again, this is me going right back to systems again, right? And really understanding that we have spent so much time villainizing the victim that we have not done the work to really to build the equitable systems that get young people to those places. Oftentimes, you might have to be in some kind of program where some folks flew in and supported you and thought you were this smart, amazing, smart black kid, right? And so because of that, and your family might have had whatever, they moved you into these other programs that kind of get you on this trajectory of bigger things because you've seen bigger things, right? But then you have family members who have not had that same opportunity, who might even been in the same school that you were in when you got selected to be in that program, right? I think that it just goes to um, opportunities and decisions, right? When folks don't have the opportunity to make the decisions that other folks have, they have to do what they have to do for their babies, and hopefully the system will act right, but the system don't always,
Yeah.
not always in support. So I just wanted to just say that, like, as we continue this conversation, because I hope we do, in this particular question, it really is sometimes that access and opportunity that that we miss out on, our young people miss out on really early,
Yeah.
really early.
And I think too, when we think about the pathway and the trajectory for our children, we have to make sure that we are really exposing them to the breadth of opportunity. So, I think back in the day when some of us were younger, CTE, pathways were considered lesser than. But in this day and age, that's no longer the case. And when we talk about setting young people up for success and pathways to career, it's not just about college. It can be about a trade school pathway that can lead them to equal success. And, it's also about, as we talk about humanizing young people, listening to them to actually hear what their real dreams and goals are. I tell people all the time, if we are setting young people up to dream and to do big things, we can't give them our dream. We have to listen to their dream and then create the opportunities for that dream to happen. So if a young person says to me, I want to be an electrician, then we're going to do everything that we need to do to make you the most successful electrician and set you up to have your own electrical technician company in the future, right? So building the pathways in ways that make us listen to children and then show them that their dream is a possibility. Kevin, I saw you wanted to jump in on this.
Yeah, I was just going to essentially say what you said, Rhonda. I think it's imperative for us to with think about and reimagine and really ultimately redesign us the system so that it is responsive to students and it's responsive to the needs of community. So often we have this conversation about, what is the purpose of education? And that's a difficult answer, and that's multi-pronged. There's an element of social and economic mobility for certain, right? There's an element of civic participation, and there's an element of humanity and just being a good person, like, right, and actualizing into whomever you want to be. And we have to understand as a system, we have to provide options because people are different. People are different, even within communities. They're not monoliths. They have different interests and, potential. And we'll need electricians. We'll need principals. We'll need musicians. And it is imperative that we truly invest in the development and the building and the sustainability of those systems accordingly.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm trying to look at the comments at the same time as, we're having this conversation. And there's some comments in here about this need to really create support mechanisms for young people of color on university campuses. And that's absolutely the case. When I was early in my career, we actually created that kind of mentorship model on a PWI campus that I was on. And it makes the difference in terms of attrition, in terms of people being able to get the supports that they need to stay in school and actually feeling like they have a community. So that's absolutely necessary. Charles, I see you have a hand raised.
Yes, I was just going to say it even extends from the K-12 to the workforce. So I'll even say in my years, being the first African American male is tough, and people don't understand that. Yes, you're educated. Yes, you've got the will, but the barriers that you have to push through to get people just to recognize, understand you, or understand what you're saying, or they have these preconceived notions about what a black man is or how a man is supposed to um, perform in an area. Those are things, and I'll just say for myself, it's and I've shared with several people, it's like, I don't want to be the first anymore. I'll come next after someone. It is too tough for me, that level of stress to break that ground, even when you're doing great work, but being the first, um, people put different types of, and what we've said, they put their own, um, I'm trying to think of the word that I'm looking for, but their own preconceived notions of what it should look like or how it should be viewed through the lens of a black male. And I'm like, you're not even a black male, so how are you trying to tell me what it should look like when you don't even know? And then I'm not going to answer for all black men, so stop asking me to answer for all black men because you don't ask him to answer for all white men or her to answer for all white women. So don't expect me to be able to answer for everyone, but that pressure that comes from that is something that we don't talk about often in our community. Even as black men, it's like, okay, we just push through, we just push through. But that level of stress that comes with it to ensure that you don't go over too far, but you go far enough, and then that you do enough to ensure that you are making um, avenues for everyone to be able to travel down.
Mhm.
Yeah. Dr.
Brandon, I'm going to
Phelps.
ask you to weigh in, and then we're going to turn to the questions that are in the Q&A box. Go ahead.
Oh, appreciate it. Sorry. No, I appreciate that this was landing. This was one of my notes I wrote before we started today. Like that is why it is so keen to have to not just rely on a certain few people. I mean, obviously, for those who are actually on payroll who are hired, you only have what you have. But when I look at my institution, there is actually a lot of black staff and faculty. It's how do we engage them meaningfully, even if it's just 5, 10 minutes, just to swing through the office or swing through that black student event, right? When you walk across the hall or across campus, you say hello, how you doing? Even if you don't say you don't know their name, you just say, hey, how are you? Or give them the head nod. Like that goes a long way. But I think that is a training, a socialization rather, that we don't all experience the same way. Because me working in my multicultural affairs office, I have to do this work. It's what I want to do, right? I'm naturally involved in particularly black male students' lives and in this black community in general because that is who I am. So I gravitate to that. But when I'm one of a few, as I mentioned earlier, I do feel the pressure to show up for them. Right. I have other responsibilities in my job that actually does not pertain to just black men or black students. I have to do a lot of other projects and event planning, plan all the heritage months. I advise veterans. I do all kinds of stuff. So when I work my 8:30 to 5, I'm still going to stick around till 8, right? to go to that event, and that may be twice, 3 times a week. And so, but I don't get return time in that. I don't get PTO for that. I don't get, time that I can come in late. But it's like, what if the other staff or faculty across campus said, I want to come to this, right? So maybe this, because I mean, they're gonna know if Brandon came, but they're also not gonna feel bad because I'm the only one who didn't come. You know what I'm saying? And that I think is a big stressor that was part of my first couple of years of my profession. But that is why I've been so instrumental in providing people knowledge. Hey, this event is happening next week. Come just for 5 minutes. Come grab a plate of food. Introduce yourself to students you don't know, and I guarantee that actually integrates the campus a lot more than you think it does, and actually aids in retention. And so I appreciate Dr. Faust's point about being represented, and when you are in these leadership roles, when you're in a space, the only black man in a room of stakeholders, if you do well, it's like, oh, okay, I guess he's good. But when you don't do, I guess, what you're supposed to do, or you look a certain way that is derogatory, it is indicative of the entire culture, and that's also not fair. So it's a both way, positive and a negative. But yeah, we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah. Thank you. So we do have a couple questions so far in the box. The first question is, how can we better support, fund, and leverage grassroots organizations to partner with schools and serve more children and families? Most school districts are overwhelmed and asked to do too much. Absolutely agree. And Larry spoke a little bit to that earlier when he talked about the Baltimore context. One of the things I'll offer, and then I'll turn to our panelists, is that there are public dollars available to make these partnerships happen. And we have to make sure that our organizations are aware of those opportunities and have the ability to actually leverage them, right? So in the workforce funding, in our K-12 funding, in TANF funding, there is monies available to do wraparound support services in partnership with schools. But our organizations that are led by people of color often don't have the relationships to even access those dollars. And some of the more popular youth development organizations that don't have cultural grounding and context are the ones that access those dollars first. So how do we turn that on its head and ensure that our local community organizations have the opportunity to access those dollars, because they're the ones actually providing the most meaningful services that are rooted in culture and understanding what our children and families need? Go ahead, Larry.
I mean, ultimately, those organizations are the ones who are proven, have proven success, right? Those organizations that young people know, that they have been connected to through, I mean, beyond school. I thank Dr. Miller for this question, because it's something that is on our heads all the time. We have BCYF, but what about all the other opportunities to create the other streams of dollars that we can create to bring more of the small grassroots organizations into the fold? I think that, we have to really work on procurement systems, like particularly with city schools, so that people can really have the access that we're trying to create. I mean, and then also on the city level, the procurement process kind of holds folks back from being able to get into that space. But there are dollars out there that we need to be able to, I even think sometimes of this repository of resources, right? It might not be dollars, but it might just be knowledge that folks are able to access in a way that we don't really make it available, unless, like you said, Dr. Rhonda, unless you have the relationships, or you know who to call, or you know who to get connected to. But if we, had this central place where folks can kind of just tap into and say, this is what my program does, and kind of match you with the dollars that are available. Because understanding philanthropy, everybody's idea of equity is different, right? There's not a flat a flat definition for that. And then, sometimes in this philanthropy space, people pick and choose who they want to fund and how they want to fund. But if there was this repository, right, where folks can kind of do a matching game, but then also if there was opportunities where people made soft handoffs to larger systems, like if my kind of like me, right? I sometimes will say to some folks, hey, this is a great organization. I don't know if you know anything about them, but this is what I know, and can I connect you guys? right? And so sometimes some organizations just need the soft handoff, right? Because we all are a part of networks and systems that other people may not be a part of, but we can make those connections because that's what Black people do, right? Like we want to make sure that folks are connected. I think as another point is that you made is really understanding the cultural relevance of the programs that are provided. And I'll just give Dr. Miller a shout out because he runs an amazing rites of passage program for young people. But the other really dope part of it is that they also train Black men to do that work as well, right? And we don't spend enough time in that space, right? Like here I go, right? We do so much to young people, but we don't think about the folks that we put in front of them as well, right? And Dr. Miller and his team have done an excellent job of training Black men to be in front of Black boys to do great things for our community. So I just wanted to give that quick shout out really quick, but yeah, it's a conversation I think that we all have to continue to have to kind of come up with that solution on how we really make that real space for Black-led, Brown-led organizations, grassroots folks who are really, really doing the work every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kevin?
Larry just made a really important point just there with regards to investing in Black men as leaders and developing in their craft. Research shows, and the number of the very limited studies show that like Black men want to be supported and want to be invested in, particularly from a skill set development piece, right? And so when you think about navigating like the education pipeline to becoming a better teacher or becoming a chair of a department, right? Or becoming a principal or becoming a leader of an education nonprofit, there are oftentimes there is this thing where it's like, okay, we'll assign you to be a dean of behavior, right? As a Black man, like there's that's the one particular position in the K through 12 that like there's a pathway to, right? But if you want to become a principal or if you want to become a department chair or a position that orients to a skill, right? We're not thought to be engaged in those type of professional development opportunities, right? And so, my research uncovers very much just that, like, right, like that investment or support isn't there innate within the system, and it's oftentimes the case that you join an affinity group or you got a brother you talking to that tells you, hey, like there is this space that you need to join, or there's this thing you need to do to grow as a leader or as an educator. And so just that particular piece of an investment and support for blacks, not just Black students but Black men in the education ecosystem is so important.
Yeah. And I will raise here that a part of the work that we did in Forward Promise was the funding of organizations led by people of color who did that kind of training with their staff to ensure that everybody that was on their staff brought their best selves and their best perceptions of young people and their best ability to work with all types of young people, regardless of their identities, right? To bear in this space, because all kids don't need the same interventions. They don't need the same touch, from the adults in their lives. And you have to know how to get to know them and understand them in order to be impactful. And so the organizations that we funded through Forward Promise were ones that had demonstrated their effectiveness in training up teams of individuals that worked effectively with young people. And what I have found is that in the shift away from philanthropy, focusing on issues of boys and young men of color with specificity, where they earmarked dollars for that community, many of those organizations now are suffering and unable to find resources. We need the specificity of funding. We need people still committed to saying Black men and boys and young men of color are an important population, and we're going to dedicate resources to them and not just combine them underneath all of the other strategies that we're doing and have these one-off organizations who happen to get funding. So that's just my plug for, work being done that really focuses on our communities in an intentional way and demonstrates that there is importance in that kind of investment. We did have a second question in the box, and this question, Brandon, was actually directly for you. It says you mentioned that you are breaking the barrier between athletes and non-athletes. What results do you believe breaking these barriers would yield, and how do you plan to do that?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you. Um, yeah, it's a larger issue than just this campus. I see it even represented across the country as I look at different schools, where athletes are told to be by their coaches and their side of the campus to just focus on the student athlete experience. Really, if we're to be honest, the student part oftentimes is neglected. It's just the athletic commitment, right? And then for the non-athletes, I see that they want to connect. Problem is you don't hang out with who you don't know. You don't show up for who you don't know. You're not going to support people, right? So I think that creates a little bit of tension there. Specifically with the work that I'm doing, I think I'm in a really great partnership with athletics. I mentioned my affinity group leadership. My vice president works in athletics as their diversity officer. And then my supervisor, she's a diversity officer for student affairs. And we have a new athletic director who just came in, who's a black man who's pro supportive of bridging that gap. So I think as we move into this new academic year, a lot can happen, right? We want to be mentors in those spaces. We want to have administrators and student organizations go over to that side and also have them conversely come to our side. We want to see student athletes get involved in leadership spaces, whether it's our Black Student Association, if they want to go Greek, right? We have several athletes who are Greek. So that's fantastic. But I think right now, as you're looking at the whole system of NCAA, NIL, these athletes are already gaining money, a lot of money at that, depending on who you are and where you go to school. And so there's a lot more leverage that the athletes, the best, the 4 and 5 star recruits have to really make a statement. Now, I think they have to do it in a unified standpoint because if you go by yourself, you're going to become a martyr. They'll make an example of you. So I think what in my personal opinion, what Deion Sanders did at Jackson State is more important than what he did at Colorado. But they didn't really appreciate that and elevate it in the media as much because it was HBCU, right? What if the 5 best players, recruits from football or from basketball, all said, "We're gonna pull up at Howard"? Ooh, that would shake the table. Ooh, that would mess everything up in the best way. But right now, there is still control through a majority of our athletes because if you are not getting a lot of money through NIL or you're getting your school paid for because you're on scholarship, to the degree they try to dangle that carrot over you, saying, "Well, if you want to do against our orders, we will take you out." I won't say it's here on this campus, but I will say I've heard from my friends. I have friends who are both in the NFL and the NBA. And they told me that when they try to go to org events or try to pledge, the coach will say, "I'm pulling your playing time if I found out you pledging." You find that you go into hanging out with people who aren't athletes. You're not in the gym or you're not in the weight room. I will pull your playing time. So that culture needs to be removed because I think that definitely reinforces the structure of the house and the field enslaved. That's really how I feel it is as an institution of higher learning. And that's not okay because when you get out, let's say you do make it to the pros, there's a point in time to where you have to retire. What if you get injured, right? You get put in majors that you really don't want to be in. So when it's time for your career to stop, how are you going to sustain yourself? How are you going to build a family? Because maybe you got a degree, but you didn't really do anything with it. You got passed through. And I really, really worry about our black men because they're not being invested into intellectually. They're just kind of made to be this brand in this breadwinner. And that's not fair to them and their families. And once again, I'm gonna end with this. When the society pushes black men as athletes and entertainers, those who are not get seen as lesser or not as ideal. And so that creates a whole nother topic for another day to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. So we did get one last question in the chat, and it's actually similar to the question that I was going to ask our panelists to part with, which is, if you could pull one lever within the education system that could catalyze a movement for Black boys, what would you focus on? And we'll make this our parting question. So we'll start with you, Charles.
So if I could pull that one lever, it would be that we train better in secondary, not, I'm sorry, in teacher prep programs,
Mm,
how to work with Black boys, Black men in our school system. I think oftentimes we come out without having um, the desired need and skill. So if we started it there, then I think that would help throughout.
yeah, thank you. Kevin?
It's difficult to choose one, but if I had to choose one in the moment, I would say I would pull the leverage of race and gender conscious policy evaluation. And that at not just at the district level, but at the school level as well. It is imperative we know what we're talking about. And one of the things, the challenges is those stakeholders, they're not having conversations about us. All the conversations they need to be having about us, and if they are, it's in a way that's not honoring the multiplicity of the situation, right? And so it's talking about students or Black boys in particular from a deficit, but never really talking about the system, right? And its response to, those particular challenges, and also the victories that exist and how to continually elevate those victories. And I think that just starts with gender conscious policy evaluation, data tracking.
Mhm. Okay. Brandon, I'll come to you. What's the one lever you would pull? And then Larry, I'm gonna give you the last word.
Sure. I want to see an increased accountability for educators who project negative, racist, and discriminatory projections onto Black boys. Because of my village, this and that affected me. If anything, it set a catalyst for me and a fire to prove him wrong. But my senior year of high school, I did dual credit English. I had a white professor, and he told me that in 3 to 5 years, I would be in the penitentiary in front of the entire class. He told me that, and I just laughed at him. I said, "You do not know who I am, but I guarantee you, in 3 to 5 years, I will not be in prison. I will be finishing college." And look how that turned out. But because I had support, I was safe. But I wish that teachers and professors who are daring enough to say something like that, they need to get put out. And a lot of times they just get allowed to go on administrative leave or they skirt it under the rug because it's just the one person. But no, if they're doing that to somebody like in my broad daylight, they're doing it behind closed doors, and that's not okay at all.
Absolutely. Larry.
I would the lever, man, that is so hard. I would say, can I mix two, like funding and partnership, right?
Mhm.
Basically, I just kind of believe that like philanthropy and other funding places really must fund long-term Black-led work, some of the work that Dr. Miller kind of mentioned, and then just tapping back to what Dr. Beckford, what Kev said is policy has to be race and gender explicit, right? We can't dance around it. We gotta be straight up to do the work. And then practitioners, folks who are doing this work, have to partner with not just have to partner, and we talked about this a lot. Like we really have to partner with young people in their own progress. It's not something that we can come out of our back pocket and lay it on them and expect it to stick. It really has to be something that we do in partnership and not like the tokenized work that often folks like to do. Like, oh yeah, I got a youth seat, or yeah, we talked to some Black boys on an issue that Black boys don't even deal with, but we talk to them, right? So those symbolic gestures, we don't need those. That we get enough of those. And then we just again, what I think we all talked about today is this really this systemic change. Like we really have to not victimize, not villainize the victims of a system that has never supported, was not designed to support um, any of us, right? Not even putting those expectations that it's gonna work. It really is what we know, that no one is coming to save us, and that we have to be able to work and save ourselves and our young people, which in turn saves our communities.
Ashe. Yes, sir. I am so grateful for each of your participation today. You all have given us a lot of food for thought. This is not a conversation where we solve everything in one day. You know, it's multi-layered, it's multifaceted. There's a lot of work to be done. And I want to thank each of you for the part that you play every day when you get up in the morning and you decide that you're going to make a difference in the lives of boys and young men all across this nation. I want to thank everybody that logged in to be a part of the webinar today. Again, the name of the report is Our Dreams Won't Be Deferred, Reclaiming Progress for Black Boys, for Black Men and Boys in an Age of Retreat. There is another webinar coming up on September the 17th, I believe it is. Oh, that's the old brain not kicking in. On September the 17th is our next webinar. It will be focused on employment and wealth. All of these topics are interwoven, and you will really see how they each touch each other. So please get on the website, take a look at when the next webinar is, plan to be engaged. Thank you all again for contributing to this conversation today. And I'm excited for where we can take it from here for the next 15 years.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Appreciate y'all.